Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And today I want to talk about how to calm down an out of control appetite, because binge eating feels like the ultimate of out of control appetite behaviors, right? When I was struggling with binge eating day in and day out, I remember feeling really frightened. I was so frightened at how controlled I felt by my appetite, so confused and ashamed about my constant desire to just eat all the time. And when I felt so out of control around food, all I wanted was to feel in control. And it seems like the rational answer, if you're feeling out of control and it's chaos, to want control and order feels like the safer place to be. But of course, what then happens when you're struggling with binge eating is you're in the chaos and you're out of control and you're trying to claw that control back. And then the more you try to control and quash your appetite, the more out of control it becomes. So it's like a pendulum. You end up swinging between out of control. Maybe sometimes you get towards control. If you're like me, sometimes I'd get towards a bit of control, but a lot of the time, even the attempts at trying to get back into control just seem to push me further into the out of control place. So in this video, I want to share with you 4 tips about how you can gain some sense of regulation and balance with your appetite again. But before I begin, if you are watching this in April 2022, I would love to invite you to a free event. It's called the Food Body Self Summit, and there are going to be over 20 people at this event who work in this field around healing relationship with food and body. I'm going to be at the event. Stephanie Michelle, my podcast co-host, she's also going to be at the event. Renee Zager, who's been on the channel before, you can see her story in the binge eating recovery story section. And Dr. Rachel Evans, who I'm hoping to get on the channel very soon, and lots of other great names. So it's an online event. It starts on the 25th of April. I'm going to put all the details below so that you can sign up to the link, and it would be great to see you there. Now, getting back to the 4 tips. So the first one is probably the hardest, actually, and it's probably the one that you may find yourself feeling the most resistance to. And it's to accept that you have a powerful appetite. For the longest time, I didn't want to accept this part about me. I think that those of us who struggle with quite extreme reactions to restriction and control around food, I think we have maybe a particularly powerful appetite. Because you might see other people out there who do seem to be able to control their food, and you're spending all your time trying to be like them, and you can't understand why you can't do it and they seem to be able to. I wrestled with this for so long, and even now, the minute I think about restriction, like my appetite becomes dysregulated again. And in order to keep myself in balance and to be able to self-regulate, I needed to accept that for whatever reason, whether it's biology, psychology, for emotional reasons, I have a very strong reaction to control, to deprivation, to threat of deprivation around food. For some reason, and I need to feel free around food and free to make choices in order to be able to actually make choices and not be ruled by my appetite. It's that old adage about accepting the things you can't control. Because until you accept a situation, you then can't do anything about it, because you'll be fighting with the things in the situation that you can't actually control. We can have influence over our appetites. There are things that we can do, but ultimately, if you struggle with binge eating, chances are, for whatever reason, you've got that switch in you. I've preferred to reframe it as like a life force. There's a part of me that is so determined to keep me alive that it is going to just fire up at any perceived threat of withdrawal of food or choices around food. And tip number 2 is flexible structure. So that is basically feeding yourself regularly. The body, our biology is really wise. We've got a hunger hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin learns our patterns. So if you eat at similar times every day, your hormones around your appetite will start to match up with that and you will level out. They reckon this takes 2 to 3 weeks, so it happens pretty quickly. Although 2 to 3 weeks can sound like a long time, but in order to program your biology, 2 to 3 weeks is not a bad time frame. And another way that having some structure and regular eating helps is that it helps you to get out ahead of hunger. Now, this to me felt counterintuitive because if I wasn't hungry, I didn't want to eat because I struggled with this appetite that was so out of control, and sometimes I felt that just by eating, I was going to be triggering my appetite. So it would be easier not to eat so much during the day, but then of course in the evening I would eat even more, and I'd be confused because I'd have a meal in the evening that seemed filling, so I couldn't understand why I wanted to carry on eating. But if you're not eating regularly enough and you're not eating enough during the day, what you might find is you get to dinner time, you eat, yes, you feel full, but you don't feel satisfied because those signals have been turned down. Which brings me nicely on to point number 3, or tip number 3, which is to seek out satisfaction. Binge eating doesn't feel satisfying. It's this chasing of this satisfaction that you never quite get. When we're binging, normally one of 2 things is happening. One, we're feeling deprived, or maybe we have been restricting. So we're struggling to feel satisfied because in the moment we can't get enough food into our bodies that's going to trigger off those satisfaction feelings. Or if your binge eating is more emotional, you're trying to use food to fill an emotional gap that food wasn't designed to do. So therefore you don't quite reach that level of satisfaction there either. For me, it was such a trigger to eat a meal and to feel in my stomach, to know I'd eaten, but to not feel satisfied and to still have that wanting. I sometimes described it as like knowing I'd eaten, but almost not feeling like I'd eaten. So then I'd think, okay, I just need this other thing, and I'd have that, and I'd be like, nope, still want something else. And then eventually I'd just go to hell with it and eat everything. And so one thing I found really useful in my recovery was when I was making food decisions, to give myself that freedom to make choices, to eat all the different foods, but to ask myself, what is actually going to be satisfying now? And to prioritize satisfaction as being the goal when I ate, because satisfaction has a moderating effect. We can't always feel 100% satisfied when we eat. Sometimes we'll eat something that we just didn't fancy. Sometimes there won't be enough of it. Sometimes we'll be eating in a stressed state and we can't experience the satisfaction then. But on the whole, we want to experience it as often as we possibly can. But let's say you're in that situation and you're asking yourself, okay, what will satisfy me? And the answer is kind of, well, nothing feels satisfying. I don't know what to eat and I can't think of anything that will satisfy me right now. Maybe you're not even sure that you feel hungry, but it's lunchtime. In those situations, I think the next question to ask yourself is, would it be wise to have something? I think we all carry quite a lot of wisdom inside us. We're just not very good at listening to our own wisdom and following through. It's why you're often a lot better at giving advice to friends than you are at giving it to yourselves. You know this stuff. You often have a voice inside you that's saying, this might be a good idea, or this probably isn't such a great idea. But we don't listen to that part of us when we're in conflict with us, because maybe we're trying to lose weight or we're in a fight with our appetite, so we can't listen to that inner wisdom very easily. So whether it's wise to have something is going to depend on this whole, am I trying to eat regularly? Am I trying to feed myself and nourish myself? When am I likely to be able to eat next? Sometimes if you don't know what you fancy, giving it 5 minutes and coming back and asking yourself again, you might have an idea. But if you still don't, you can use your wise mind to make a decision that, it'll do. This desire to get it right because there's so much anxiety and conflict around your appetite and food is one of the things that will keep tripping you up. And the fourth and final tip is that the emotional state you are in when you eat matters. On several occasions, I've worked with people who have believed and genuinely experienced food intolerance issues, IBS symptoms, and they've been convinced that they've got something physically wrong with their digestion. And then when they've managed to reduce their anxiety and their guilt and their feelings around food and they're eating in a calmer state, their symptoms disappear. Now, this is not me saying what might be going on for you, because their food intolerances and IBS symptoms are a real thing that can be indicators of something not working very well in your digestion. But our emotions affect our digestion. They affect how our bodies receive food. I mean, I don't think it's very easy to feel satisfied and stressed and guilty about your eating at the same time. Because for me, satisfaction is that sense of like, that hit the spot, that felt good. And you can't experience that when you're feeling guilty and stressed. And I think this is one of the places where people trip up when they give themselves permission to eat, is because they're still feeling very stressed and guilty around food. Therefore, the elusive self-moderation or self-moderating behavior around food doesn't seem to kick in automatically like it seems to for some people. So getting ourselves into a calm state when we eat, I appreciate could be easier said than done, but what actually will dictate your emotional state when you eat is what's going on in here. What are you telling yourself around this food choice that you're making? What are you anticipating after you've eaten? We need to develop the capacity to reassure ourselves around food. We need to develop a reassuring voice. You've probably got a critical voice in there, most people have, and it's not necessarily about even necessarily being possible to completely get rid of that critical voice, but we can bring in some reassurance. How is it you want to speak to yourself when you eat? Reassuring yourself, I'm just going to eat this and I'm just going to notice how I feel. This is not about getting it right, it's about experimenting and seeing how things feel. And if I can do that from a calm place and a place of allowing, then I can learn in that state. I can't learn when I'm in a state of guilt and stress and anxiety. So watching what's going on in your mind and also being able to calm your body. If you sit up a little straighter when you eat, you will be able to breathe better. Taking a few slow breaths before you eat. Connecting to your body. Taking a moment to give thanks for the food. All these types of things can help bring us down into a more calm and grounded state when we eat. When we eat from that place, our appetites, they don't freak out in the same way as they do when we're switching off, because we just can't face it, because we know that if we do, it's going to bring up a whole turmoil of feelings. So in summary, number 1 is to accept that you have a powerful appetite. Number 2 is to introduce some flexible structure around food, regular meals. And number 3 is about satisfaction, eating foods that you enjoy and trying to experience that satisfaction as often as you can. And number 4 is around bringing your emotional state down when you eat. If you are able to practice these things, these are the kinds of things that will get you into balance with food, which is that middle ground between out of control and control. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.